So today's video is going to be the evolve of a makeup brand, and that makeup brand is Anastasia Beverly Hills. Thought I'd do an updated Anastasia Beverly Hills video because there's a lot of stuff I didn't know, and through research I've found out more, and also I've done a couple of videos, but they're more just going over particular points. Thought I would compile it all together and do one comprehensive video, though I will link both those videos down below and you can watch them if you like. It's an interesting brand. Also, I had a lot of fun researching, like I do generally enjoy research, so I thought I'd do another one. Anastasia Beverly Hills came into the camp of being such a popular brand that then had such a big downfall, kind of like Too Faced, Kat Von D and Jeffree Star. They were all brands that had such big downfalls. Even Becca Cosmetics. Though Anastasia Beverly Hills was kind of like the goody two-shoes of the makeup brands. A brand that was not really talked about negatively in reviews, not really in drama channels videos, but was like the goody two-shoes reputation has kind of fallen off. Anastasia Beverly Hills is an American cosmetics brand. Founded in 1997. Anastasia Soar was born in Constanta, Romania in 1956, aged 65. Anastasia stayed in Romania till she was 33. At the age of 33, she moved to the USA. Anastasia spent a lot of time studying Romanian history. She also studied like art and architecture in college. In 1989, she moved to Los Angeles with her husband and her daughter. At the time, she spoke very little English. Anastasia worked as an esthetician in a salon. How Anastasia Beverly Hills started was that eyebrows were a very unexplored area of makeup. So Anastasia researched techniques to shape people's eyebrows according to their bone structure. As a manager, Anastasia didn't think there was much of a market for eyebrows. What Anastasia created became very popular, especially in the Beverly Hills area. There was a timeline on their website. Anastasia's techniques were based around the golden ratio, which she was taught by her art teacher in Romania. After perfecting this technique and it gaining popularity, she opened her own salon in Beverly Hills, which provided body and facial and eyebrow sculpting and waxing. At first, Anastasia had two clients, Cindy Crawford, and other clients included Jennifer Lopez. Anastasia was featured in a Vogue magazine. Anastasia went on the Oprah Winfrey show, which was a huge deal. It was the biggest talk show that you could get on. She did Oprah's brows live on air. A year after Anastasia opened the salon, she created her own products, but 2000 was the year Anastasia released her own products for general consumers. They became known for their brow products. Still today are known for their brow products. Anastasia's first brow kit included a brow pomade, a brow gel, a brow powder, scissors, and branded tweezers. Anastasia, it's clear to see, she's definitely popularised sculpting, shaping and filling in eyebrows. Anastasia, you could say, was the 2000s version of an influencer brand. People would buy products because of Anastasia, because they knew of her and they'd seen her in magazines. Social media was not a thing until the 14th of February 2005. Today, anyone can launch a product, talk about it on their social media, and can be successful as long as they have a good product. Anastasia was really reliant on mainstream media. According to the timeline on their website, Anastasia would spend her weekends going to these different department stores to promote and show clients how to use their products. At the beginning for Anastasia, there was definitely a lot of grinding and hustling and hard work to become successful. People were hesitant because it wasn't very familiar to a lot of people, because nothing of that sort of thing until Anastasia created it had been popularised. Eventually people got more into makeup and more people started doing stuff to their eyebrows, and the brand really sort of took off. The years of 2006 to 2007, Anastasia Beverly Hills brow range was sold in Sephora and Ulta. This really gave the brand exposure to a wider audience. Also at the beginning, in these top beauty stores, the advertising you couldn't really get anywhere else. This was 2006, only YouTube had only just begun. The beauty community was not really a thing yet. Anastasia Beverly Hills was the brand you'd think of when you thought of eyebrows. If you wanted eyebrow products, they would be the brand you'd go to. It was definitely years that before that Anastasia would put something out that wasn't brow related. But that was the time where there wasn't much of a makeup bubble. Not much advertising, not as many launches. Product releases weren't happening at a rapid rate. Everybody liked how the brand didn't put out loads of products for a cash grab. They liked how they were cohesive, good quality, really fitted the brand's aesthetic. Now in the makeup market, every brand has eyebrow products, whereas at the time Anastasia Beverly Hills was doing something quite niche, which was part of the reason they were so strong, and it really sort of paid off doing something more niche. 2012 was the year Anastasia Beverly Hills started utilising social media. They were the first brand to really utilise social media. On Instagram, Anastasia Beverly Hills has 19.4 million followers. On Twitter, Anastasia Beverly Hills has 681 followers. On YouTube, Anastasia Beverly Hills has 175k. Instagram was rather new, a new social media platform. It only launched in 2010, so it had only been around for like 2 years. Anastasia's Beverly Hills daughter, who we knew as Norvina, really saw what Instagram could do for the brand despite her mother being very hesitant about social media. She saw the potential in Instagram. As for far back as 2013, even though Norvina hadn't yet officially taken over the brand, she was still pitching her own creative ideas to expand and evolve the brand in order to keep the success flowing. Anastasia was the expert at brows, and it was Norvina who had ideas for everything else. 2013 was the year the brand launched non-eyebrow related products. The very first product that wasn't brow related was the Anastasia Beverly Hills Contour Kit. This got so much hype and talked about on social media. This got sold out on their online stores. The feeling of missing out the product gave. Also around the time they launched their liquid lipsticks. Liquid lipsticks had been a thing, but it was still kind of a new thing. Not many brands were doing liquid lipsticks. Whereas now there are loads of brands doing liquid lipsticks. Anastasia Beverly Hills definitely made stuff that was not really a trend into a trend, which made them a little bit more niche as a brand. 2013, Anastasia Beverly Hills launched the High Rise Foundation. 2014, you hit the makeup bomb. Makeup YouTube is becoming very popular. Anastasia, as they were expanding makeup was becoming more popular. Influencer marketing really started to boom in 2014. Anastasia Beverly Hills started doing eyeshadow palettes and doing gel liners. Anastasia was the first well-known brand for influencer collabs. They did influencer collabs in eyeshadow palettes. They collab from 2014 to like 2019. The brand put out a crazy amount of products. Eyeshadow palettes, highlighters, face products, all sorts of different products. It's a case of nothing but eyebrows for ages, and then all these other things came along. 2014 was the year that Anastasia Beverly Hills launched coloured liners. Anastasia was the kind of brand that influencer marketing made, but also broke them too. Anastasia Beverly Hills had done really cool collaborations like palettes with Anne Breezy, makeup by Mario, like you had 2 different Anne Breezy palettes, the Anne Breezy highlighter. Anastasia Beverly Hills did a palette with makeup by Mario, which launched on September 29th, 2016. Makeup by Mario was a very famous makeup artist. Still is very famous. There was other hyped up Anastasia palettes like the Lavish palette and the Self-Made palette. Anastasia Beverly Hills like Too-Faced. There was like the collector's mentality which surrounded the brand. The most iconic Anastasia Beverly Hills palette was the Modern Renaissance. There was a lot of people where this was like their first Anastasia Beverly Hills palette. This was iconic. This was an iconic point of makeup, was the Modern Renaissance palette. And this really made the brand well known. The glow kits were very popular. These glow kits really popularised highlighters. Anastasia Beverly Hills continued to expand their liquid lipstick range. Anastasia Beverly Hills launched their contour sticks, foundation sticks. They were launching these niche things like cream contour sticks. That was quite niche. Something obvious is Anastasia Beverly Hills with their products. They were trying to appeal to makeup artists as well as general consumers, whereas a lot of brands try and appeal to like general consumers, like they're not really targeting makeup artists. Anastasia Beverly Hills, you could tell, weren't just a brand that was catering to the average consumer. They were catering to makeup artists as well. 2016, Norvina became president of Anastasia Beverly Hills. Norvina does get a lot of criticism. A lot of criticism is rightfully so. But she really did creatively push the brand in a creative direction. Modern Renaissance, the reason why it was so popular was at the time it was something completely new. A warm-toned palette was not a thing. Nowadays there's lots of warm-toned palettes. Before this palette you had neon palettes or cool-toned neutral palettes like the Urban Decay Naked palettes. Though both the Naked palettes and the Modern Renaissance were iconic parts of makeup history. Like, I kind of want to do videos going through like makeup history and that, and doing like the makeup archive. Like, I think I've done one makeup archive video, like what would still be cool today. Sort of going back through years and seeing what happened during that year. At this point, they didn't do a ton of product launches. Like, they had gaps between their launches. Modern Renaissance really opened everyone's eyes to different possibilities in the makeup world and different possibilities within neutral palettes. At this point, the brand was not launching a ton of products, which meant when they did launch their products, it was very exciting, very anticipated. Everyone would be so excited at what they were going to launch. There was a 3-year period between Anastasia, Beverly Hills launching Modern Renaissance and them launching Subculture, though they were the top brand. Anastasia Beverly Hills launched the sister palette to Modern Renaissance, which was Subculture. This was meant to be like the cool-toned version of Modern Renaissance. Subculture has definitely got very mixed reviews. With this palette, you really had to know what you were doing. Subculture can be very hard to blend, very powdery. The Subculture shades, in comparison to the shades in the Modern Renaissance, are more true to colour, and Modern Renaissance is easier to blend than Subculture. Though I do think the colour scheme for Subculture looks really nice. I saw in reviews, I watched people reviews on Subculture and seeing how it worked. Like, you watch people trying a million different methods. Like, you watch people trying to, like, blend it out. It was quite hard to blend up, and hard to blend up into the crease. It knocked off the pigment. The pigment that was knocked off left a line. Also, watch Smoky Glow's review on Subculture. We'll leave some Subculture reviews linked down below if you want to watch them. If you want to know a bit more about Subculture, yellows turn to browns. Another thing to note is that some colours blended into nothing. When this didn't do so well, people were disappointed because everyone loved Modern Renaissance. After Subculture, they went on to sell the Anreezy highlighter, Sultry, and the Norvina palette, the Soft Glam palette. That was like the third one because I heard of the Anastasia Dip Brow first. Then I heard about Modern Renaissance, and third I heard about was Soft Glam. Other than the Norvina palette, all these palettes did really well. Subculture at the time was not really a huge deal, but if it happened now, it would be a huge deal. At the time, Subculture was marketed as the cool tone sister to the Modern Renaissance, so everyone naturally assumed that Subculture would have the same formula as Modern Renaissance. This was probably the first time in history that this brand had got bad reviews. Anastasia did a whole Instagram post. At the time, people just thought it was nothing, but if that happened today, it would be a much bigger deal. Nowadays, that would be seen as so defensive because it was so defensive. During the rest of the year, they did Prism. I would love to own Prism. Like, that's like me wanting to own that. Sultry, Soft Glam, all these incredible successful launches. Like, I love their older makeup up until like the Norvina palettes. Now we get into the downfall of the brand. This is where we move into 2019. 2019 was the year of the downfall of the brand. With every Anastasia Beverly Hills palette up until this point, each palette had its individual moment to shine. Other than the Norvina palette, Subculture palette, every palette was good and had a consistent formula. 2019 kicked off with the Riviera palette, which was the first Anastasia Beverly Hills Brights palette. I like the colour story, but not sure. But I think I prefer the one they launched after. Then after launching Riviera, they launched the Alyssa Edwards palette, which pretty much had the same colour story as Riviera, so I preferred that one over Riviera. Like, they had a couple of different colours, like I will put two on screen and you can compare them. Then they launched the Jackiana palette. I feel like all the people that did collabs, their palettes never got the moment to shine in the spotlight. But yet, there were some good palettes. Like, I think I prefer Alyssa Edwards palette over Riviera. I like the Jackie Aina palette. Thought it was a really interesting colour story. Then we move on to Carly by... well, first Anne Reezy and then Carly by Belle. After these collaborations launched, there were all these Norvina Pro palettes. It became annoying because it's a very overwhelming amount of choice. Like, there's almost too much choice, to the point where it's almost just too much to choose between. This was coming into maths consumerism, and the makeup consumerism was really starting to feel down when Anastasia Beverly Hills was coming into maths consumerism. Because at this point everyone had their collection, they'd already built their collection, so people were buying less makeup. This was not really the time to be launching all this makeup, because that stage had gone. Norvina definitely got some backlash. She kind of addressed it, but not really. The first reason was there was production issues, which was the reason all these products came out in such a short space of time. Then she said it was not her choice. They were wanting to keep up with the makeup marketing of consumerism. People in 2019 didn't want to be consuming all this makeup. They wanted to buy less makeup. Anti-hauls were becoming a big thing in 2019. People wanted to be told what not to buy instead of what to buy. There was a type of confusion of what was with all these Norvina palettes and what was like the regular Anastasia Beverly Hills, which was definitely off-putting for consumers, which definitely annoyed consumers. When all these palettes came out, everybody assumed they were the normal Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes, but they had a different formula. After all these palettes launched, Norvina made a comment saying that there was going to be a Norvina section and it was going to be different to the Anastasia Beverly Hills section. Being a sub-brand of Anastasia Beverly Hills, this is fine, but make it clear what's Anastasia Beverly Hills and what's Norvina. Some transparency would have been good. Loads of brands do subsections, but there were a lot of brands that did it better than Anastasia Beverly Hills did. What contributed to the success of Anastasia Beverly Hills was they had clear branding and a very clear direction to the structure of their branding. This was not very clear. Anastasia Beverly Hills had their consistency. They were more consistent to other brands, unlike Too Faced that didn't really have much consistency. Also, these 3 Pro palettes would have made a great first launch. They just didn't do it in the right way. It was good because it was colourful and unique, and it was good to see something different from the average Anastasia Beverly Hills. But the launch and making the announcement that it was a subsection just left people thinking, why couldn't you have just said that it was a subsection in the first place? Right from the start. Why wait till now? Anastasia Beverly Hills was the OG influencer brand. People loved Anastasia products. They also liked Anastasia the person. Also, Anastasia really worked hard to build the brand. With Anastasia, you know what you're going to get, whereas with Norvina, you didn't really know what you were necessarily going to get. Also, Anastasia has a name for herself, whereas Norvina, we didn't really know anything about. She wasn't an influencer, didn't have a massive following. Norvina has 1.6 million Instagram followers and on Twitter 2.7k followers. Now we're going to move on to talking about the list. I have a whole video on the list. That's one of the 2 videos. I will link that one down below. The list definitely wasn't done because Norvina cared about small creators. It's done in a way to screw them over. Those are like my general thoughts on the list. It was big on Twitter. Basically, Norvina tweeted out saying, they were doing a search for the Anastasia Beverly Hills PR list. This was called the list search. Basically, Norvina was going to send these PR packages to smaller creators to create looks for Anastasia Beverly Hills. Sending PR's fine, but there's no obligation for them to show it on their channel and to have to create content. If you're gonna create content for a brand, that becomes a sponsorship. Norvina said to use their already existing Anastasia Beverly Hills products to create their own looks in order to get our attention. Issues with that is Anastasia Beverly Hills needs to pay small creators to create content and do proper actual sponsorships. People were just consistently tweeting #the list. Norvina definitely was very manipulative and definitely misleading to smaller creators in creating content into believing that not getting on the list was the end of the world. 2019 was definitely moving away from tutorials and was a lot more review based. Obviously, there were benefits to smaller creators getting PR. They can post their reviews sooner because having to buy the product means they have to wait for it to arrive, so by the time they do their review, nobody cares about the product and their reviews become irrelevant, and by the time, and getting PR means they can post their reviews quicker and means they can push their reviews into the algorithm and become more relevant. So for smaller creators there were huge benefits, but not every creator made it onto the PR list. It was just free promotion for the brand, even though I do think that they should pay smaller creators for their work. Like, they were sort of just getting free promotion without having to pay creators to do sponsorships. It was the case of Norvina doesn't really care about smaller creators and lifting them up. She cares about the free promotion, and because you don't get that from bigger creators, like with smaller influencers, she was crossing boundaries that you never cross with a larger influencer. A year later, in 2020, Anastasia Beverly Hills, after the PR search and the hype at the list died down, they basically took off all these smaller influencers off the PR list. They can do that, like, PR's a gift. That's what it was intended to be. But it does kind of show they were crossing boundaries with these smaller influencers that they would never be able to cross with a bigger influencer. Things about the brand were starting to come out on Glassdoor reviews. These were leaked onto Reddit. There was some not really great things said. There'll be some come up on screen. The biggest complaints were about Norvina and how she was very unprofessional and ran the business in a very strange way. She based the success of the brand on astrological signs. At the end of the day, it's a business. Good to be interested, but me, I don't really get it, and I do think it's really strange. Also, Norvina would only really hire men. These are some other weird things. She wouldn't hire people who were too attractive, and other times would only hire people who were attractive. For me, it just doesn't make sense. It wasn't just a couple of bad reviews, there were loads of terrible Glassdoor reviews. Working with Norvina was a terrible experience, which when you're trying to build a brand or a subsection, your personality is really important. The controversy definitely destroyed the brand and really did hurt their reputation. Even though today the brand's still successful, you don't really hear about them on YouTube. People really are put off by the aggressive launches, but also Norvina's shady business practices, screwing smaller creators over, really putting really did put people off. The Goody Two Shoes brand of YouTube definitely became a more rebellious brand on YouTube. The hype for the brand had died down. Launches didn't instantly sell out. Anastasia Beverly Hills, when you'd think of all the controversy had finished and just disappeared and they went into the background, they did a collaboration with an LM. Tiffany Ferg did a video on that, so I will link it down below if you want more information. You would think they would do research into who they're collabing with. It definitely causes people to lose trust in Norvina. Moving into 2021, they launched the brow freeze because 2021 was going to be the year of brow laminating. This was a liked product, but Anastasia Beverly Hills came out with some not so likeable products, like the Primrose palette, which to me just looks so uninteresting. Now we're going to talk about my final thoughts. I think, to be honest, Anastasia is a brand that I always will feel to a degree on the fence about. Like, I like their older products, but I don't support Norvina. Like, because all the stuff I've talked about in this video and stuff I've researched myself but chosen not to include. I haven't included everything. There's some stuff I've just not included. So I'm always on the fence. I do like their older products, but Norvina I just can't really support. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.